Compare that to the Japanese, where 83% of Japanese children are being raised by both biological parents. So I didn't know how to measure this. I wanted to quantify all these factors, and I thought the best measure would be children who come from single-parent families, because the statistics here are just really unusual. Children in single-parent families compared to two-parent families, they graduate from high school less frequently, they suffer more addictions, they suffer more abuse, they are twice as likely to become alcoholic, they are 3 times more likely to have a baby out of wedlock, they are 5 times more likely to commit suicide, 5 times more likely to fall into poverty, 12 times more likely to be incarcerated. So this megatrend is really quite serious. It starts around 12% in 1968 and comes up to close to 30% presently. There are different ways of calculating this. Some people say it's 41%, but this is a measure of social pathology, and it's something that we are not fully conscious of. Fourth, the emergence of perverse and bizarre entertainment. Well, I thought I would look at 4 things here in my book: trash TV, reality TV, violent video games, and pornography. And I didn't realize that the United States is the largest producer of pornography in the world. I didn't realize that. The number of pages on the internet has increased 20-fold since 1999. It is about 248 million pages of porn on the web. So in 1985, it begins with what you call trash TV, where children come home from school, they turn on television, and they see Maury Povich, even Oprah Winfrey, certainly Jerry Springer, Ricky Lake, Geraldo, and they're basically exploiting the poor, exploiting the suffering of poor, exploiting the disabled, as you can see in this particular video. Children are watching programs in the 4th grade. They come home and they see a program on incest. Sally Jessy Raphael had a show once that appeared in afternoon television about an 11-year-old girl who had incest with her grandfather, had a baby, and murdered that baby. That's great entertainment for a 4th grader. Now take a look at those people. That group of people represents about between 14 and 20 million Americans who are vicariously participating in their own couch potato Roman Colosseum. And it happens every week, and it doesn't just happen on trash TV. Fear Factor, reality TV, these are people who are competing for money to degrade themselves and humiliate themselves, to expose themselves to worms and immerse themselves in a vat of snakes, or have a contest to who can eat the most live scorpions wins the prize. And again, it's vicarious enjoyment for rather perverse interests. I decided to measure this in terms of the sale of violent video games. If I used pornography, it would be simply to inflate it. But the sale of violent video games represents our megatrend here, and it has increased about 4-fold since 1999. There are a lot of countries, by the way, that censor these kind of things. Australia doesn't allow it. Greece does not allow children to play with war toys or guns. Luxembourg does not allow children to have access to these materials. We don't even have a discussion of that in our country. A 5th factor is that a cultural elite emerges as a parasitic class. The number of millionaires in the United States increased 20% in the last 5 years. We now have 408 billionaires in our country. Now, many people have suffered over the middle class has not done well in the last 20 years, but since 1980, the net worth of America's richest class increased 7-fold. So that is a strange metric. The top 1% of American society now controls 25% of all the national income and 40% of the national wealth. Now, if you look at this megatrend, you could see something very stark here. In 1928, in the era of speculation and flappers and wild behavior on Wall Street, just before the Great Depression, the top 1%, they were having a ball. Okay, this is kind of like America's Gilded Age. They controlled about 24%, 23% of the national income. Well, look at it today. It is the same as it was on the threshold of the Great Depression. This is not true for Japan. It's not true for France. In France, about the top 1% controlled 10% of the national income 30 years ago, and it's the same today. In Japan, it's the same story. The top 1% controlled 10% of the national income 30 years ago and today. But in the United States, we've had an explosion, a paroxysm of the super rich. And that is a pathological sign. The movement, we are the 99%, obviously comes from this statistic. Factor 6 is called internal or external violence. And here I wanted to concentrate on crime. And I was amazed that the total number of crimes committed in the United States is greater than any other country in the world. It's almost as if we are socially accustomed to a higher level of anarchy in our country than others. We have twice the crime than Germany or Britain has, 10 times more than India. When it comes to, take a look at robbery. In the United States, per capita, robbery is 179 times